Welcome to the Audio Insider podcast from Axpona. My name is Lenny Florentine, and I am here with Rich Maez from Monarch Systems. What's up, man?
Hello. How are you?
I am just awesome. This is a great time doing these podcasts, and I'm excited because we have a couple brands that you represent that we're going to talk about today. So if you can let everybody know kind of what they are.
The three brands I think that we'll probably cover today: Chario, loudspeakers from Italy; SME, the turntable manufacturer from England; and cables from Siltech, the Master Crown series from the Netherlands.
How long have you been doing like Axpona?
This will be our third year. We've been doing distribution for 5 years, and then the first couple they were shut down because of the pandemic. So we got in when we could.
So your newest line is SME.
Yes.
Which is probably a great place to start because I think a lot of people know about the brand, but I'd love to get kind of an update on the brand, what they're doing, maybe some new products they have, what you're going to show at Axpona. So I'd love to hear all about that.
Okay. So SME has been hard at work kind of doing some, we'll call them high dollar upgrades to the factory. They've got a lot of investment that they've put in, new machines, new portions of the factory. And as a result, they've been able to come up with a few new products. The top of the line is what we'll be doing at the show this year. It's called the Model 60, and it is their highest performing turntable. We will have that one available at the show, and we're going to be playing as much vinyl as possible. There will be streaming as well, but vinyl will be the primary focus because that turntable will be there.
Now, there's something special about this turntable. I know a couple things, but there's one thing I already know is that you can kind of get this in any color you want. Is that true?
Yeah, there's a limited edition kind of an option for the Model 60, and it is something they call it one of one, and they will anodize it in one particular color that you choose. It's custom for you and for you only. They will use it one time, then they'll wad up the recipe and throw it away, and nobody else will ever have that color again. We're going to have a blue one. It's not one of the one of ones, so if you want a blue one just like ours, you can get one. But there have been a few that have been made in very unique colors. There's a fuchsia pink one out there. There's one that's Kermit the Frog green. There's a kind of a yellowish gold one out there. So there's some interesting colors out there.
That's amazing. And what else makes this? So this is the new flagship. So what makes this turntable special? Like what's this one all about?
Okay, well, first, probably the easiest thing for people to understand is there's it's a custom version of their Series 5 arm, the tone arm for this turntable. Instead of being made out of magnesium, it's made out of a polymer. So it is inert as far as resonance goes. That is unique to the Model 60. Also, whereas most of the SME turntables are suspended in the vertical plane, this one is suspended in vertical as well as horizontal, and it's damped so that not only is it not affected by outside mechanical influences, but being taken care of in vertical and horizontal, it should be the most stable turntable they make.
So what actually holds it? Like, how does it suspend itself like that?
From what I understand, there is the usual, they have a kind of a suspension band that they put in towers on the four corners of the turntable. And then they've got some hydraulic damping as well in those four corners that prevent any type of resonance or vibration from being transferred onto the plinth of the table itself.
And SME is a brand that a lot of people have known. It's got a lot of history behind it. Can you in kind of enlighten us on that a little bit, like the history side of SME?
Actually, it started 75 years ago. It used to be called SMEC, and that was the Scale Model Equipment Company. And they made little tiny scale models of cars and trucks and little race car models. That's where they started. And Alistair, the founder of the company, wanted to try to make himself a tone arm for a turntable that he had at home, and just kind of use some of the precision machining tools that they had at the factory, made himself a turntable, and got into the kind of the hi-fi business from that angle. They have done work with Formula One racing. They've done aerospace work. They've done even appliance work. All of this coming from the fact that their ability to produce products is very, very, very precise. A lot of the machining that they do, even some of the castings that they do. And something that I thought was interesting is for all of the parts that you see on an SME turntable, they manufacture all of them, even the screws. They cut their own screws. They cut their own threads. The little O-rings that are used as suspension, they manufacture them themselves. So everything has their level of quality control.
So what is like their most, so they have a full line of turntables, maybe like 7 or so?
Yep. So they've got...
And what's their most like popular one?
Probably the most popular one is the Model 6 Classic. The Model 6 has 2 variations. It's their entry-level turntable. One has a J-shaped tone arm. One has a straight tone arm. And the Classic is the one with the J-shaped tone arm. From what we've seen anyway up to this point, with the limited amount of experience that we've got with the line, the Model 6 Classic is selling more than any of the other turntables. It is, it's a relatively simple turntable. It's easy for most people to set up. There's not, you don't have to spend an entire day putting the thing together. And that's been the one that we've seen have the most popularity in North America.
So can we look forward? So we're going to see the new flagship one at Axpona. Any other tables going to be there, or tone arms? Usually it's mixed in around the show, but like, what's the plan for Axpona for SME?
Well, for our room, we've got 2 sides. We've got a suite. So on one side, there will be active demonstration, and on the other side, we'll have passive, just products available for, you can poke them, you can touch them, you can do whatever you'd like. We're going to try to figure out what other turntable we can bring. Everything is kind of limited by the amount of space we have, however. So loudspeakers take up a lot. If we can manage to get another turntable squeezed in there, we will. We'll bring it. I just don't know if we'll be able to have it on display. It'll probably be a Model 6.
So the other brand you have is Chario.
Yep.
And they have some, I'm looking at the speakers right now, and they're beautiful speakers. They're just amazing looking. So tell me about Chario, because I don't know anything about the brand. It's new to me, but they look amazing.
Yeah, Chario is in this weird position where they've been around for a very, very, very long time, but they're relatively unknown to a lot of people. And the easiest way to remember pronunciation, it was founded by 2 engineers, Charlie and Mario. And that's where Chario comes from. They've been around for 50 years. This is their 50th anniversary. All of their products use solid hardwood walnut, not veneers, not little thin pieces, but these are pieces that are about an inch and a half thick. I think the most interesting thing about the way Chario builds is years and years and years ago, 49 years ago or so, they looked at walnut, and what's available in Italy is your normal European walnut. It's got a very consistent finish and a very consistent color and very light grain to it. They liked American walnut. So, because American walnut has a deeper grain, darker grain structure, and they looked at it and said, we really like the American walnut. We should probably just grow some American walnut here in Italy so we can harvest it and make loudspeakers out of American walnut that's Italian. So it's a different type of walnut than you'll see from just about any other European manufacturer, because they use transplanted American walnut grown in Italy. All of the
So you're telling me they grow the trees to build these speakers?
Yeah, that's one of the advantages to being 50 years old, is you've got that ability. It's interesting because if somebody wants something that we didn't have in stock a couple of years ago, before we had our hands on absolutely everything, it might be a year before you could get the speakers, depending on whether they had it already in the warehouse being dried or not, the wood anyway. They would harvest the walnut, and then it is cured and dried for a year before they use it, so that it's not going to be subject to problems with moisture or cracking or anything of the sort. We have stock of everything now, but for a while it was it was going to take a while to get certain things if we didn't already have them.
So how many speakers are in this line?
Off the top of my head, I can think of 14.
It's a pretty vast line then.
Yeah, there are 3 different series in the Chario product line. Constellation, which is their entry level, Aviator, which is their mid level, and Academy, which is their top level of their reference series. And we will be bringing the top speaker in the Academy speaker, so it's the big kid.
And this is is this a brand new model for their 50th anniversary?
No, it's been around for a bit. It's just the first time it's been shown.
Okay, but it's exciting that it's a big anniversary. I think that's really cool. That they've been around for this long, and it, now it's just really starting, get the name out there. It looks like an amazing product. I can't wait to see that.
In the U.S., they've never really had substantial distribution. They've had limited distribution here in the U.S. They'd always been waiting for what they considered to be the right partner in North America. And when we inquired, they had heard of us, so we had a leg up there. And now that we are presenting the brand on a national level, there, other than just the handful of dealer network places in the dealer network where you could see the stuff, we're trying to get them established nationally and see if we can get them kind of to have a much bigger presence here in North America.
That's amazing. Just building the brand, building a 50-year brand kind of from the ground up in North America, which is awesome. I'm looking at the Chario Academy Serendipity.
Yep.
This is the one.
Yeah.
Right. So this speaker, how much does this weigh? Do you know off the top of your head?
I know that it's heavy because I just moved a pair in our demo space.
We're talking over like 200 pounds for this one.
If I remember, because there are 2 pieces. There's the base. It's the wider part that you see. That is the subwoofer section. And then the upper part, it's kind of the tower portion of it. That is the mid-range mid-woofer and tweeter section. If I remember correctly, when the 2 pieces are put together, it's somewhere around 380 pounds.
Oh, wow. That is wild.
Yes.
So you got the highest end. What is like the entry level to the Chario brand?
That would the series would be called Constellation. And if you go, there's a teeny tiny little monitor. It's about 12 inches, 13 inches tall. It's called the Lynx. And it's either a desktop bookshelf or stand-mounted speaker. There's a stand available for it too. But in the Constellation line, there's everything from the Lynx all the way up through a speaker that was just given an Editor's Choice Award by the Absolute Sound this year, called the Pegasus. And that's
Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, that's their largest floor-standing speaker in the entry-level series. One of the things that you notice with Chario, if you see the pictures of it with the grill off, the tweeter and the woofer are reversed. They're upside down, with the tweeter being in the center of the speaker. And they've done a lot of research in the way loudspeakers interact with the home environment and the way they interact with the room acoustics. They started out 50 years ago as a company that did research on how the human body perceives sound. They were not intending to get into loudspeaker manufacturing. And they discovered that the human body is very sensitive, the human ear is very sensitive to phase distortions within a specific range. So they developed a tweeter that bypasses the crossover point between the tweeter and the mid-range, and it handles high frequencies as well as mid-frequencies to avoid that thing entirely. That's where this whole thing started. And the Pegasus is one of the speakers that it's been around a bit longer than some of the others in the line, and it takes advantage of that in an obvious way. The way that the woofer is mounted on the front and on the rear and a few other things, so that it has less interaction with furniture within the room and more interaction with the room itself.
That's wild. I love hearing about the design, and that's very unique of how that is designed and why it's designed that way. I don't know of that many other tweeters that kind of take care of the mid-range as well.
Yeah, the domes are fairly large. And Chario, not being a company that initially started as wanting to be a speaker manufacturer, they have a lot of things that they do a bit differently, some things that they focus on. They do not develop products for use in an anechoic chamber because none of us live in one. They don't
I've been to one, but I haven't lived in one. I've spent some time in the dark in one. That was an interesting
That
experience.
sounds awful.
But yeah, I'm hoping to do that a little more as a challenge one day. But I could never live in one. So you're right. Like that everyday use of a speaker, that's very important to kind of go from that development aspect of that direction.
Yeah, crossover engineering, physical placement of woofers from the floor, as well as in relation to the other woofers within the speaker. All of these are things that they take into account because they know that the speakers have to be used in a typical home environment rather than in an anechoic chamber. And they're trying to engineer the speakers to have the best possible response when being used in a home environment rather than a test lab. So they take some things into account that are somewhat of an oddity in the industry, but it's also something that works very well for the typical user rather than the engineer with a microphone and a room with no echo in it.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good, way that they'll brand themselves in the market is going about it that way. That's, it's kind of unique. Like a lot of people kind of do their stuff the opposite.
Yeah. It's very typical for people in this industry and for engineers in this industry to focus on very controlled response for a loudspeaker. And when it comes right down to it, that kind of control does not exist once you get the product out of the crate or out of the box and put it into somebody's home. So Chario is trying to make it work acoustically ideal in a customer's home with furniture and, a room which may not be symmetrical and so on and so forth. That's their focus.
And so which ones are you bringing to Axpona this year? Are you bringing the 400-pound ones? Are you gonna try to lift them up there's probably a weight limit on the elevator at some point. I don't that's pushing it.
What we're going to do is we're going to have the guys that do drayage for the show get them up to the room for us. All we have to do is unpack them and put them together.
That's a task in itself, I'm sure.
But we will probably bring one example of the Pegasus, the one that won the Editor's Choice Award. That will be there on static display. We will probably also bring something from their mid-level for static display as well. And then a couple of examples from one of the other brands that we distribute as well.
That's amazing. It's going to be fun to get to listen to these and actually just see them, like to see this wood that is grown to build these speakers. That's just a story in itself. So I'm excited for the Chario brand in the U.S. That's going to be really a good thing. I think the brand's, it's gonna grow, and it has a mission that a lot of other brands don't. And the third brand that you are doing, what is that?
The third one we're kind of focusing on this year is Siltech. It's a cable manufacturer from the Netherlands, and was in June of last year, 7 months ago, they released their flagship product called Master Crown. And this is a 10-year development project for the best cables that they have ever produced. They have developed their own test equipment. They have developed their highly sensitive test equipment because measuring cables it's not an easy thing. They have developed their own electromagnetic spectral analysis software for this kind of development. Very, very, very engineering intensive. And this will be the first time at a show in North America that a whole loom of this cable will be shown.
So, and what makes this specific model different than the rest of theirs?
They call them cores. We call them conductors or conductor bundles. This cable line has the greatest number of conductor cores or conductor bundles of any products that Siltech has ever produced. It is the quietest cable line that they have ever produced. They are able to measure that. It is also something which, as I mentioned, they do electromagnetic spectrum analysis on cable development. This has the lowest interference rate for electromagnetics of any cable they've ever developed, and quite likely any cable ever developed for audio. Something that's interesting is a lot of companies take a look at the way a cable is developed and designed and engineered, and they try to reduce external factors from impacting the audio signal that's passing through the cable. Siltech does that, but they also understand that the way the conductors are wrapped and the way they're bundled within a cable creates elements that can affect the audio signal internally as well. So they also try to contain those negative effects inside the cable, as well as shielding the cable from external influences.
That's interesting. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. A lot of people do just look at external factors, and I've honestly never thought about the internal factors. So that's an interesting point. So for somebody who, hasn't dabbled in cables, what are the effects of a better cable and then like a premium cable like this?
So there are multiple factors that kind of account for how a cable interacts with a system and how it interacts with, the signal that it's passing. I think the first one, everybody has seen, monster cable. You can buy it at Home Depot, and it's big, therefore they call it monster. One of the very first things that was discovered is the size of the cable has an impact on sound and the size of that bundle. When they first started developing high-performance audio cables, they thought, it's bigger, maybe it's able to carry more current or whatever. There are a lot of things that go on. There's resistance within the length of the cable that varies with the length of the cable and also varies with frequency depending on how the cable is bundled or built. There are factors with the way that the conductors are positioned next to each other that'll have an effect on capacitance. That's very well understood now. Electromagnetics are some of the things that Siltech is focusing on. There are things as far as the way that the bundles of wires inside will change depending on if the cable is bent, that will change the layout. Therefore, a lot of cables are very, very, very stiff to try to prevent that layout from changing. Siltech is very interested in making pliable or flexible cables. So they're coming up with solutions that will not be as dependent on having a fixed layout within a cable, but enabling it to move without changing things.
One of the worst things for high-end cables, by the way, is when you can't move them and they're like solid straight and you just no flexibility in building your system.
Yeah, Siltech has had one model that was called Triple Crown. It's still available. You could use the power cords like a baseball bat. The things, they could not make a power cord less than 1.5 meters long because it would move things. It would scoot products. There's also metallurgy within the cable. The type of copper that's used in their entry-level pieces, they call it monocrystal because it's drawn from a single crystal of copper rather than being, just take some molten copper and then draw it into a wire. They're taking a single crystal, and there's a very specific way they go about doing that. The next step up is called a silver-gold alloy, and they have silver conductors. And at one extremely specific temperature, they will inject under high pressure gold into the silver because silver crystals are like little ovals. They don't sit together without gaps between them. And they inject gold to fill in those gaps. It also helps make the cable more pliable. The fidelity is better. And then you go one step further up their chain and they have monocrystal, so you don't have those gaps between crystals because there's only one. The conductors are drawn from one, and that's their top-of-the-line cables. So just, the way the conductors are annealed, the purity of them, the way they're drawn, the way they're bundled, all of these things have an impact, as well as the way that they're shielded, both internally and externally, as far as things that can affect the fidelity of the signal being passed.
Now, they make not only the Master Crown's a speaker cable.
It's interconnect, speaker, and power.
Okay, so that's just the series. I was going to say, so they make all three interconnects, speaker cables, and power cables. It's kind of where I was going with that. Now, the question I have for somebody who's venturing in to cables and power cables and speaker wire, if you were to rank, if someone could only get one or two things, not do them all, if you were to rank in importance between speaker cables, interconnects, and power, what would you do?
So I would say the way we've always looked at it is the most important thing you can do is start at the beginning of the chain of componentry and make sure that things at the beginning are behaving optimally, because you cannot fix errors at that point in the chain further down the line. So in other words, we tell people if you have to start with one, because very few people, especially with Master Crown, are going to be buying an entire bundle at once, start with power. get your components to function optimally, and it is audible, you can hear it. Go ahead and get those things functioning optimally, and then work your way down the chain. Go through interconnects and then do speaker cables at the end. Because if you don't have the source components functioning optimally, the only thing you can do is pass the errors or the infidelities on down through the chain.
That's an amazing explanation, actually. That's very good. It's controversial sometimes. Like some people may not, agree, or they may have other opinions on it. But like when you say it like that, like, because you're right, you can't fix the problem that already happens later down the chain. And that
yeah, I mean, I wear glasses, and it doesn't matter how good my glasses are. If what I'm looking at is, if what I'm looking at was blurry, it wouldn't help if I had better glasses.
Yeah, I wear glasses too, and apparently I need them because I couldn't find them to put them on for that segment. So that's amazing. It'll be nice to, get to see the cables, get to see the speakers and the turntables.
So it's one large room, and there's a wall along that separates the two about 3/4 of the length of the room. So we've got one side that'll be quiet, it'll be passive. We can have conversations there. We can run people through, features and products and what they do and why we choose them. And then on the other side of the wall, we'll have an active system set up with some places where people can sit. And, we'll have refreshments and so on and so forth there. We like to make it a comfy place for people to go.
I myself am looking forward to coming and seeing these the Charios, because just the whole story with the trees has me like, I gotta see what the finished product looks like in person from a company that grows their own trees, makes a speaker out of them, and they're huge, like 400 pounds huge. So I can't wait for that. SME is always a big draw at all the shows, so that's a great line. The flagship turntable is going to be fun, and the cables as well. It's a good time. I can't wait to see you guys there. It'll be really an enjoyable time, and as it always is at these shows. You have fun at these shows, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have, our feet are sore and our backs hurt by the end of the show, but it's always nice to go and have conversations with people we haven't seen for a year, or let's say we've been talking on the phone with somebody for a few weeks prior to the show. We get to meet them face to face. It's also nice for us because we get to see and hear these things every day. We get used to them. They become somewhat commonplace. And it's interesting for us when we see somebody have their first exposure to them, either visually or sonically, and to see how they react to them. That's always fun as well.
That is the exciting part. That's the exciting part. Well, Rich, I thank you so much for being on the Audio Insider podcast. I can't wait to see you at Axpona. It was a great time. I learned a lot. I enjoyed the cable conversation. It's always controversial, but it's fun. So I appreciate it, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We will see you guys next time.